Designed and engineered in Australia, built in South Africa and headed for the world at long last, this is the new Volkswagen Amarok, which now shares its platform with the T6.2 Ford Ranger. But does it look like a Ranger? Well, you tell me. So let's start with the basics. What exactly are we looking at here? Well, this is of course the second generation Volkswagen Amarok Ute or pickup or bakkie or light truck or whatever you call these B segment vehicles wherever you happen to live in the world. The Amarok was Volkswagen's first ute of the modern era. It's not the first time they ever did a pickup, but the modern first generation Amarok has become a bit of a legend here in Australia and in other markets around the world because it was kind of the first ute that did the luxury and refinement thing well in this segment. But of course, the first Amarok was a genuine Volkswagen product through and through. It used Volkswagen engines. Everything was Volkswagen above and below the metal. And that's what's changing on this new second generation Amarok, which shares the platform of the incoming T6.2 Ford Ranger. Not necessarily a bad thing, though of course many of us recall the Mercedes X-Class, Nissan Navara, Escapade, and Volkswagen are certainly hoping that the same thing doesn't happen to its Mark II Amarok. Well, they have chosen a platform sharing partner that also knows what it's doing. And of course, in our recent Chasing Cars 2022 Ute Megatest, the outgoing Ranger and the outgoing Amarok took first and second place apiece. So the new generation sharing the same platform, well, they could be very good. But is the Mark II Amarok going to feel like a Volkswagen? Well, the company says it will, and we will be finding out later this year when we get a drive of the new ute, so hit subscribe down below. In today's video, I'm going to take you through the engines that are going to be offered in this Amarok. I'm going to tell you who makes them. We'll walk through the design of the vehicle, outside and in, where it doesn't really look that much like a Ranger. We'll talk about the range of the Amarok and the Australian release date and possible pricing, some new safety features, and then I'll wrap up my initial impressions of this second generation Volkswagen Amarok. So what will you find under the bonnet of the second generation Volkswagen Amarok? And this is really important because the outgoing Amarok's 3-litre Volkswagen TDI V6 diesel engine was so beloved, especially here in Australia, but everywhere around the world. And that's because Volkswagen's V6 TDI is such a great engine. It's reliable, it's smooth, it sounds good. It's been used in Porsches, in Audis. This is a proper luxury car diesel engine, and it's dead for the Amarok because every engine that you can get with the new ute is from Ford. This vehicle is being built exclusively at Ford's Ranger production line in Silverton, South Africa, although it's basically being jointly operated with Volkswagen for this joint venture that Volkswagen say they were pretty much equal partners in. But in terms of what goes into the engine bay, Volkswagen say they've got 5 engines for the new Amarok, one petrol that we won't get in Australia. That's a 222 kilowatt, 2.3 litre Ford EcoBoost engine. Essentially, we won't be getting that one. There are 4 diesels though, which we will get a selection of here in Australia, led by the 184 kilowatt, 3-litre single turbo diesel V6 engine that Ford have already revealed specifications for their Ranger. And no surprise, the specs are exactly the same for the Amarok. 184 kilowatts of power and 600 Newton meters of torque fed to an all-new 4-wheel drive system that you can leave in 4-high all the time, a bit like a Mitsubishi Triton's Super Select system, and kind of like the old all-wheel drive system on the outgoing Amarok, but this one has low range and a 10-speed torque converter automatic transmission. So the 184 kilowatt, 3-litre single turbo diesel V6, that will be the hero engine for the new Amarok here in Australia. Then there's going to be a 2-litre as well. In Australia, we'll probably get the 154 kilowatt twin turbo 2-litre 4-cylinder diesel. That's an engine that we're already familiar with from the outgoing PX Mark III Ford Ranger. It's carrying across into the new Ranger, and it will be available in the Amarok as well. Now, those are the 2 engines that my money would be on for Australia. There are a smattering of other diesels for the rest of the world, including a slightly lower output version of the 3-litre V6. I'm sure we'll only get the 184 kilowatt in Australia though, and also a single turbo diesel 4-cylinder that we might get if Volkswagen chooses to do like a fleet special or a very low end Amarok. But of course, the company is saying this is still the premium pickup, which is why I think we'll get the premium engines, which is the 154 kilowatt 4-cylinder and the 184 kilowatt 3-litre turbo diesel V6. But will this engine, which started life as a Ford PSA Lion V6 engine quite some time ago, will that live up to the reputation of the outgoing Volkswagen V6 TDI? Well, only time will tell. I've driven a bunch of cars in my career with the Lion V6 and it's a really good unit. Volkswagen says Ford and VW have worked together to develop this 3-litre V6 further from its foundations too. So my mind is very much open to it could be just as good as the outgoing Amarok's V6 or better, but the only thing which will reveal that is a drive in the vehicle itself. Now, design is super important for the new Amarok because, of course, VW didn't want this thing to look like a Ford Ranger at first glance. And outside, really, the only giveaways are the mirrors, which are silver on some variants, and the door handles. And these are basically hard pieces that Volkswagen says are kind of difficult to change. Virtually every other panel on the car is unique to the Volkswagen Amarok compared to the Ford Ranger. And the company says that every stamped product that goes through the press shop in the factory is unique to Volkswagen. And that's a really interesting level of differentiation, certainly more than the X-Class and the Navara. You could always tell an X-Class was a Navara when you looked at it in profile, and I think Volkswagen have done a good job of shielding the Amarok from that problem. It's a bigger car than the old Amarok. It's longer, it's got a wider track, and it's benefited from all of those hard point changes that Ford decided to make to the Ranger. And I would just pull myself up on that point because it's important to remember here that Ford and Volkswagen have actually worked on this set of vehicles together virtually from the decision point being made in the first place to develop a new Ranger. And so the two have decided on the hard points together for these vehicles. It's not like the Ranger was finished and then Volkswagen came along and decided to do an Amarok. In fact, this vehicle was designed right here in Australia, as was the Ranger, and Volkswagen have had a team working with Ford in Melbourne for the last several years designing the vehicle, and I think you'll probably agree that they've finished with a design which is quite handsome. At least that's how it looks to my eyes. There are 5 grades of Amarok and they've all been set up to look different outside. There's a base grade which has quite chunky unpainted bumpers. It'll be interesting to see if we get that in Australia, perhaps as a replacement for the outgoing Amarok Core. Then the range moves up to the Life, which looks much more like a civilian car than the base grade. Then there's the mid-spec Style, which picks up a bit more silver detailing, silver mirrors, probably quite nice wheels. And then you go to a double-headed flagship setup in the Amarok line. You can either choose an Amarok Panamericana, which is the flagship off-roading variant. So it looks like it's got kind of 18-inch wheels, all-terrain tires, underbody protection, and the like. Or you can opt for an Amarok Aventura. Now there's an Amarok Aventura on sale today. It used to be called the Ultimate back in the day, and this is basically the street Amarok. 21-inch wheels, the biggest wheels the Amarok has ever had, and bigger than any wheels you can get on the Ranger as well, which is quite interesting. Street style bumpers, very much an on-road focused luxury ute, and that's what a lot of Amarok customers in Australia right now want. And so I think it'll be interesting to see whether the Panamericana or the Aventura sells better here in Australia. Lots of differentiation, more blacked out pieces on the Panamericana. There's a sports bar around the back of the Panamericana and a sailplane at the back of the Aventura. So it's really a choose your own adventure when it comes to a luxury spec Amarok. But inside, both of these high-end grades are quite similar, and they both have a lot of Volkswagen-specific parts, including, amazingly, a leather dashboard and leather door tops if you go for the Aventura or the Panamericana. But taking one look at this interior, it's obvious that Volkswagen put their foot down and insisted that this thing not look like a platform-sharing ute inside. Okay, obviously there is the large vertical touchscreen, which is a feature that's also adopted in the Ford Ranger. But everything around that area is specific to the Amarok, including the steering wheel, which is really interesting. Mazda made a bit of a song and dance when it introduced its Isuzu D-Max-based BT50 and said it had a unique steering wheel, but it doesn't. It's the D-Max steering wheel with a Mazda airbag hub. Here in the Amarok, this is a Volkswagen steering wheel taken from a Passat or a Tiguan, which means it's going to feel completely different every time you sit in the car. It's a small thing, but over time it will add up. And then there's the fascinating fact that I think the software that the car is running is actually different to that in the Ranger. It looks like it has a separate brain and is running Volkswagen's operating system on both the 12-inch vertical touchscreen, which is 10-inch in the base models, and also on the full-size virtual cockpit. The graphics look totally different to the Ford. The fonts are all totally different. All these little markers that you'd normally look for to see if it's actually the same underneath, they all look changed, which is fascinating. There's also more hard touch points than what you'll find in most other Volkswagens. There's a volume dial, thankfully. Drive mode, all of those sorts of things are controlled by toggle keys down below that steering wheel. However, you'll note in some of these shots here that the climate controls are within the touchscreen, which not everybody will like, particularly if you wear bulky gloves or something and work in a cold environment, places where the Amarok will be right at home. Now, the basic seat is shared with the Ranger, although the upholstery promises to be different in the Amarok. However, those ergo comfort seats that you used to be able to get in some grades of Amarok are no longer going to be available. But still, from my impressions of driving Ranger and sitting in Ranger, the seats in that vehicle are quite comfortable as well. So the Amarok will probably continue to be one of the nicer utes to spend time in, especially in the back, where legroom is considerably increased and was one of the pain points on the outgoing car. Another pain point for buyers of the current Amarok has been the increasingly dated safety proposition of the ute, virtually all of which is now rectified thanks to the move to a modern platform. So features like autonomous emergency braking will become available on Amarok for the very first time, as will rear side airbags, a feature which is currently not available in the ute, but of course is baked into the brand new platform, or at least heavily revised platform that sits underneath the T6.2 Ranger and Mark II Amarok. Plus there's things like adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, and IQ Light matrix LED headlights, which should be very, very cool. But of course, all of these safety technologies are shared with Ranger, even if their manifestation in things like the specific Amarok design of IQ Light headlight certainly looks different to what you'll get in the Ford. Now, we did press Volkswagen in today's reveal of the Amarok about whether the hardware for things like the steering and suspension are different for the new Amarok, or whether it's been tuned separately to the Ranger, and we didn't really get answers to all of our questions. So I'm looking forward to unpacking those problems later in 2022, when we hope to get a drive of the Amarok on the car's international launch where it's built in South Africa. But what we have been told today is that technically under the skin, the cars share many of their components. What interests me is that Volkswagens have very different suspension feel and suspension tuning to Fords. Anyone that's spent much time driving Fords and Volkswagens knows that their rebound damping and suspension behavior is so different. They're both good in different ways. You know if you're driving a Ford Focus or a Volkswagen Golf, for instance. And one of the first things I'll be looking for when I drive the new Amarok is whether it feels different to the Ford Ranger, which we are getting a drive of next month here in Australia. So we will already have a lot of experience driving the new Ranger under our belt by the time we set foot in a new Amarok. But what I am expecting is that these vehicles are likely to have, if not the best, near best in class dynamics, having been engineered right here in Australia on our challenging roads, the pair of them. So certainly not going to presuppose the outcome. We have to drive both of the cars first, but the mission here would have been utterly clear to both Ford and Volkswagen, and that's to retain the crown of these vehicles as the best utes on the market. Differentiating between the two and deciding which is the new best ute of 2023 will be very difficult. But of course, that's one of the tasks for us here at Chasing Cars for the next time we put on a ute megatest. Speaking of the Australian release, the Amarok is slated to launch in our market in early 2023, quite early, I'm told. The first vehicles will probably land in Australia in very late 2022 for things like dealer demonstrations and early drives for the press, and there might even be Amaroks in dealers near you that you can go and have a look at. But in terms of picking up an Amarok, that will be possible in early 2023. And what's been confirmed to us today is that volume production has now started largely for Australia. So where so many utes are in poor supply and wait lists are now extremely long for the new Ford Ranger, the new Amarok might give you an option if you get in early enough when order books open. But what is it going to cost? Well, we don't know yet which models specifically are coming for Australia. Volkswagen Australia haven't even officially confirmed specific engines, but I will go with my educated guess of the 154 kilowatt and 184 kilowatt diesels. I think it's very likely we'll get both the Panamericana and the Aventura, and at least one of the Life and Style variants, and possibly the base model if Volkswagen decides to pursue a fleet strategy with the vehicle. I would anticipate that prices will rise moderately over where the vehicle sits now, but not in any crazy sense. I think it's interesting to see where the Ranger sits in market. Now, Volkswagen headquarters have told us that there's no collusion whatsoever with Ford on pricing and that it would be anti-competitive to do so. But certainly for Volkswagen Australia, they will be paying very close attention to where Ford have positioned the T6.2 Ranger in our local market. And that caps out at 85 grand for the Ranger Raptor, which has the twin-turbo V6 petrol the Amarok is not slated to get, at least not anytime soon. So I'm anticipating a top-end Amarok to enter the Australian market somewhere around 80,000, low 80,000 range. But of course, there's a lot of inflation in the economy. There's pressure on new car prices from virtually every angle. And that means that when the vehicle is released in Australia 6 months from now, everything could be different. So I'm not going to tie myself too closely to these predictions, given all of those structural factors in the economy right now. But we'll be there every step of the way. So make sure you subscribe to the Chasing Cars channel. Hoping to get a drive of the car later this year and to touch and feel it and let you know whether it does seem like a true Volkswagen, both in a static sense and crucially when we drive the car too. It'll land in Australia around Christmas, perhaps slightly after, and we'll have a first local drive in early 2023, letting you know how the vehicle feels on local roads. And of course, there'll be the all-important comparison with its platform sharing partner, the Ranger, and other top-end utes to know exactly where this next generation Volkswagen pickup is going to sit in our market. Well, those are my first impressions of the second generation Amarok. I'm very keen to know your view, so please let me know down in the comments whether you think this is going to be a ute for you, whether you prefer the design of the new Ranger, whether you think Volkswagen made the right decision by going with a platform sharing partner like Ford. I'm keen to know all of your opinions, so let me know. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, and you won't miss any of our upcoming Amarok or Ranger content. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.